That's right.
Okay, welcome to the Circularists. We're talking to Guy Lane. So, Guy, coming back to an earlier conversation that we had, we were talking about Bitcoin, and you were stressing just how environmentally damaging Bitcoin is. And you've got a message for Satoshi Nakamoto. So, tell us about this.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. So I have a background in carbon auditing. So I would go into a business and would figure out, looking at the power bills, how much carbon emissions a business is producing.
Wow.
And and in 2013, this is a few years ago now, I was living on the Gold Coast in Queensland, and I read just by chance an article about this thing called Bitcoin, which was 2013 was the sort of special year for Bitcoin where it really started to get popular and the value of the thing went up.
Mhm.
And so there was a lot of articles about it, and I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. And it was saying that there was this really big energy consumption to create these things called Bitcoins. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And the article referred to how much the megawatt hours of electricity consumption of the Bitcoin mining network, and it referenced a web page where you could actually find that information. So I
Wow.
read that, I thought that was interesting, and I went on and did something else. A week later, I come across another article about the energy consumption of Bitcoin, and referring to the same website, the number had gone up by 70 megawatts. Okay. Now, 70 megawatts is a huge amount of electricity. That's the sort of amount of electricity that a town would use. Okay. So I'm thinking, well, what is this thing called Bitcoin that will increase its energy consumption by the equivalent of a town in a week? So I started to take an interest in this thing as a carbon auditor. I wanted to understand it.
Sure.
And so I started to read about Bitcoin and get my head around it. And what I realized was you can't do a conventional carbon audit on Bitcoin because Bitcoin is a distributed network. There's hundreds or maybe thousands of individual players who are contributing to the mining of the coin. So you can't just go and find the power bill from the CEO. You know what I'm saying? So you needed to find a new way of trying to assess where this energy consumption was coming from. So I drilled down and I drilled down. And what I come to understand was that there was a linkage. It was an imperfect correlation, but a correlation nonetheless, between the price of the Bitcoin, or the number of dollars that you would have to pay to buy them, and the electricity consumption. This is what I found in around September to December 2013, right? I think I was the first person to understand the mechanism by which the price of Bitcoin determines the amount of electricity that's consumed in order to run the network. Okay. And when I say electricity consumed, I'm sort of talking de facto carbon footprint, because most electricity is generated using fossil fuels. What I found was that if
Let me just read that back to you, just to so that we can keep our viewers with us.
yeah,
So
yes,
you found a correlation between energy consumption and the price of Bitcoin.
yeah, exactly. Okay.
Stand on that.
Now,
How does that work?
okay, so Bitcoin is an open system. Anybody can get the software and start to mine the Bitcoin. Okay, so the Bitcoin system seeks to create a certain number of Bitcoins per day.
Right.
And if there's too many people in the system, if there's too many people running the calculations, then they make the calculations harder to compute. It's a mechanism called difficulty. As more people come in to mine the Bitcoin, or the Bitcoin mining machines become more efficient, they have this thing called the hash rate. As the hash rate goes up, then they increase the difficulty. And what was built into the system, not as a flaw, but as a design principle, was that this system would be limited by the amount of electricity that was consumed by the mining, by the software mining it. It's like if you had if you want like a calculation of 1 + 1 is 2, that's very straightforward. But a calculation of 4,000 divided by the square root of 75 is really complicated. So the more people that are trying to mine the Bitcoin, the more complicated this calculation becomes, right? And what it really means is that the more people that are chasing the Bitcoin, the harder it is, the more electricity that's consumed to run the system. That's basically the model. Okay. So what I found, if you actually spreadsheet this out,
Yeah.
right, is back in the day, I think the Bitcoin was around about $890. Okay. And it had gone it had gone up through this rapid increase in price. It was the breakout year was 2013. And I came into this at the end of 2013.
Okay.
If you actually spreadsheet that out, right, then if Bitcoin comes to be worth $1 million each, right, and everybody that's got a Bitcoin wants them to be worth $1 million, right? Why wouldn't you, right? But if Bitcoin's worth $1 million, following that logic, then Bitcoin's swallowing up 30% of the world's electricity supply.
30% of the world's electricity supply.
Yeah. Now, these were the numbers that I came up with back in 2013. So the numbers are probably different now because there's things called halvings and there's complicated stuff. And I was the first person to find this and put the word out about it. I did a press release and I got a little bit of media coverage, and I had like a whole bunch of abuse from the Bitcoin mining community. We're like, how dare you, criticize, Bitcoin, because Bitcoin's effectively like a god to many, many people.
Right.
And since then, there has been peer-reviewed science papers that effectively confirm what I'm saying. And there's even a Oxford University department looking at the energy consumption of Bitcoin mining. And there's even a UN resolution, which they're calling on Bitcoin leaders to actually change the code, because the mechanism that is creating this energy problem is not unique to Bitcoin, but it's unique to the cryptocurrencies or the blockchain technologies that use a mechanism called proof of work. There is other ways of doing the proofing. You don't need to do proof of work. Proof of work is what's causing the crisis.
Right.
Now, just to put these into perspective, what I was just reading, just updating my information, was that Bitcoin is now consuming as much electricity as Thailand.
Wow.
Okay. So we're in a situation now where we need to reduce carbon emissions by around 7% per annum if we are to get down to zero carbon emissions basically by 2050. And the last thing we need right now is a technology that just pretty much overnight pops up and potentially gobbles up vast amounts of electricity. For a technology to have popped up overnight that in the space of a few years was consuming as much electricity as a country itself is just mind-boggling. But given the nature of the system, that it could potentially consume these vast amounts, the 30% of the world's electricity supply is on top of the electricity supply for running hospitals and homes and keeping your beer cold in the refrigerator. Okay. And so there's these kind of pleas going out. The UN is pleading to the leaders in the Bitcoin industry to change the code, to use the coding that doesn't have the energy problem, that can slash the energy consumption down to practically zero compared to what it is now. Okay. And what I'm saying is that they've been appealing to the wrong people. The first Bitcoin transaction was affected by a character by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto. Okay, now, big question about who this is. There's an idea that it might be a guy called Craig White who's from Brisbane, which is ironically is 100 kilometers south from where I am right now. Who knows who started Bitcoin? But whoever started Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever you are, help us, Satoshi Nakamoto. You are our only hope of changing this code so that Bitcoin doesn't add the final nail in the planet's climate coffin.
If you're listening, Satoshi Nakamoto, okay, I'm going to have to edit that out. So if you're listening, Satoshi Nakamoto, we need that code change. I've got some questions for you on this, Guy.
Yeah.
So if this code is changed, and it seems that it's totally unnecessary for Bitcoin to consume the amount of energy that it is. If the code, how will that impact any previous transactions that have happened on the blockchain?
Look, I'm not the tech guy, okay, so I'm not claiming to have that the deep knowledge of that. But my understanding to this point is that it won't affect the previous transactions, right? It will have and it won't affect the transactions. That's the point. So what the Bitcoin, when I speak to Bitcoin people about this, people that are deeply into it, what they tell me is that there are all of these other proof mechanisms, but what they really like about proof of work is the first one, it's supposedly the best one. And so what they're saying is if you go to these alternative mechanisms, you end up with a cryptocurrency that's not as secure. And I'm like, and I can understand that. I can understand that. If you've got an investment in some sort of financial product, you want it to be as secure as possible. But the point that I want to make is that we live on a planet with an ecosystem, okay? And you don't get to have your economy and your society and your Bitcoin if we don't have a stable climate and
Right,
and
you want to
and
worry about lack of
lose food
security.
production.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so it's a pretty small ask to change the code to and the movement. There's actually a Greenpeace movement called Change the Code, and it's asking them to go to a program called Proof of Stake. And I don't care what the code is, whether it's proof of stake or proof of amber or proof of whatever. Just change the code so that Bitcoin doesn't have to have this massive ecological impact, because it's complete. And remember, I just want to make this point as well, right? The ecological impact of Bitcoin is felt by every human being and every living creature on this planet, right? The benefit attributes only to the people that own Bitcoin. Like, it's unethical.
Yes. Okay. So to read it back to you then, so the difficulty and the proof of work are the two points at which we need to address change.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Tell me about this mining. So for the benefit of all of our listeners, what is being mined and who's mining it? Is it a virtual
Yeah, so
physical thing?
so the word mining causes confusion to a lot of people because they think of a guy with a pickaxe and in a hole in the ground.
Right.
Yeah, so the mining basically it's a computer. So when the Bitcoin was first put out, the calculation was so easy that you could run it on a regular PC. So the first Bitcoin users, and again, when this thing started, it was in a very sort of like arcane part of the nerd, technical space. This was people that were into a field called cryptography, right? So a big part of Bitcoin is around unbreakable codes, right? So there was this like group of mathematicians, this subset of mathematicians and nerdy computer folk that were into this, and you could basically run the Bitcoin mining software on a regular computer. But as more people started to get involved in it, as the hash rate went up, which meant that more Bitcoins were being produced than should be, the difficulty went up. Then all of a sudden you needed a more powerful computer. So there was a period there in the early days where people were buying graphics cards because graphics cards had a lot more oomph in order to run these calculations. And then eventually, as this thing went up and up and up and up, the difficulty went up, the effort, the computational effort went up to mine the coin. Then they started to have these things called ASICs, which is an application-specific integrated circuit, which was a chip that was designed specifically to run that calculation. Right. So what you've now got is you've got these farms, they call them Bitcoin farms, where you've got like an entire hall, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of these little boxes, the electronic boxes, whirring away with the little lights flashing, with a fan running to keep them cool. Thousands upon thousands of these things churning away to keep the Bitcoin mining. I talked to a guy a few years ago who was an energy consultant, and he was telling me about just to give you a sense of the scale of this, there was an aluminium refinery in New Zealand that had closed down, and the electricity supplier had this vast, huge amount, like 750 megawatts of electricity that they no longer could sell. A Bitcoin mine farm came in and took over.
Right.
All right. So there are coal-fired power stations which would have closed down, right, that are now still running because they've put a Bitcoin farm into it. Okay.
We have a future-facing currency, and I know a lot of tech startups. I've even thought about inventory supply chains with contracts secured on the blockchain, all of that sort of thing. So we've got a potentially future-facing technology that's dependent on fossil fuels.
Well, just to be clear, okay, so blockchain technology was the brilliant, amazing thing that Bitcoin introduced to the world, right? But there are many different blockchains, right? Not all of them are running on proof of work. The problem is not cryptocurrency. The problem is not blockchain technology. The problem is a subset of those that run on this mechanism called proof of work.
Right.
Okay. If it runs on proof of work, it's got an energy disease. Okay. And so what you can do is you can basically get the guys that are running the systems using proof of work to agree to change the software so that it runs on a different proof mechanism. And that's all we're asking, right? And now what they're saying is, oh, we don't want to do that because, you know, it would make it slightly less safe or whatever it is. It doesn't really matter, okay? You can't have a tiny fraction of humanity, like potentially consuming 30% of the world's electricity supply. It is simply unethical on any philosophy. I'm not just talking about life-wise philosophy. I'm talking about any philosophical system, right, would say that it's completely unethical and you just got to let it go. Okay. So help us. And I'm saying the reason why I'm appealing to Satoshi Nakamoto was he was the guy or the person or the team, right? We don't know who it was, right? Who set this thing in motion. You got a moral responsibility to the living planet that birthed you. Help us, Satoshi Nakamoto. You are our only hope.
So it's time to harness creativity, to go again, and to fix this problem. It's just
fix the mess you've created, right? Own up to it. Yes. And let's face it, there was a court case recently where it suggests that Satoshi Nakamoto is worth around $80 billion. It's not like he doesn't have any capacity to actually do anything here.
Right. Thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. I hope people get behind this. I hope we make some noise together about this because it needs to end. We need an way, right?
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Guy. Guy Lane.
Okay.